The Obama administration announced earlier this week the healthcare.gov website has improved and is ready to handle a vast majority of users. In addition, President Obama kicked off a 3-week campaign to promote the Affordable Care Act and generate more participation in the healthcare system. But the program is facing multiple challenges in federal courts, including one in Washington, D.C. Federal judges heard arguments this week in a case similar to the one filed by Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt. The new case has the potential to deal a crippling blow to the healthcare law. Here with more on the case and the possible implications is Chris Castile. He's joining us from the Oklahoman's office in Washington, D.C. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thanks, Dave.
Well, let's get into it. What's the crux of the lawsuit?
Well, this lawsuit, it goes basically to the heart of the subsidies that are available on the exchanges. That, when you go out to the exchanges to buy health insurance, people, based on your income, you might get a subsidy from the federal government to buy your insurance policy. Well, the Affordable Care Act, the way the law was written when it passed, said these subsidies are available through exchanges established by states. Well, 34 states, including Oklahoma, did not establish their own exchanges. The federal government had to come in and do it, set up federal exchanges, to sell these healthcare policies. And what Pruitt and these other plaintiffs in these lawsuits contend is that the IRS, when it made a rule to implement the law, went far beyond what the law said and made these subsidies available to people, even if you bought your health insurance policy from a federal exchange. Now, if they're right, if Pruitt's lawsuit prevails or one of these others similar to Pruitt's prevails, like this one in Washington, basically the whole thing would fall apart, because you really can't have these insurance policies, you can't have the exchanges without the subsidies. People really would not be able to afford them. This would not make health care insurance affordable for people with moderate to low incomes. You need those federal subsidies for it to work. And the subsidies also trigger the penalties against people who don't buy, individuals who don't buy insurance, and businesses who don't provide it. So it's really the whole kind of system there that's at stake in this. And it's interesting, what has come up a couple of times in the last few months over the Affordable Care Act, beyond whether the website works and whether it was a good idea overall, is that the law as it got through Congress was just not really ready for prime time. And part of that reason was I don't know if you guys remember this, back in 2009, Senator Edward Kennedy had died, and they were electing a replacement in Massachusetts for him. Everybody expected the Democrat to win and maintain this supermajority in the Senate to pass the health care bill. Well, Scott Brown, the Republican, won that seat, who had campaigned against the bill. And that left the Senate without enough votes really to do what it wanted to do with the act. And it basically said to get something through quickly that then couldn't be negotiated further, So they were going to iron out some of these problems with, and that goes to, people by the congressmen and their staff members, whether they could be subsidized on the exchanges. I mean, that was kind of a mess in the bill too. But some of these things never got worked out, including this aspect of it that we're talking about, because of Scott Brown's election in Massachusetts that year. So now you've got these lawsuits that really could cripple the entire law.
We're chatting this afternoon with Chris Castile via Skype from the Oklahoman's Bureau in Washington, D.C. Chris, what are the similarities to Scott Pruitt's suit?
Right. The main argument is basically the same. The main difference really probably is that in Oklahoma, in the Eastern District of Oklahoma, in Muskogee, the state of Oklahoma and some school districts are the main plaintiffs in that lawsuit. Here in D.C., it's an employer. But the main arguments are the same, that the IRS went too far in making the rule about who's eligible for the subsidies and what kind of an exchange. This case here in D.C. that had oral arguments yesterday, as you mentioned, it's really further along, because they're actually talking about what you and I have been talking about today, and that's the merits of this case. I mean, did the IRS really go too far? The Oklahoma suit has only kind of progressed to the point that the judge in Muskogee said it's okay for Oklahoma to bring most of this suit. They've got the standing to do so. This case has proceeded along to argue about what's really at stake here, and the judge said that he would make a decision as soon as he possibly could.
That's what I was about to ask you. Any timeline, or is it too early to tell?
There's some speculation that the judge here in D.C. is going to try to make a decision on this, and that decision could be to block this IRS rule. by February. We just don't know in Oklahoma. I mean, they really haven't gotten to the point where Pruitt and the Obama administration are making the arguments about what the law means.
Very good. Chris Castile providing some good context and analysis on the latest ruling here involving the Affordable Care Act. Chris, thanks for your time today.
All right, glad to do it, Dave.
All right, and more coverage from our man in Washington can be found every day in the Oklahoman and online at newsok.com.